It's undoubtedly miraculous that an angel appears to Joseph in a dream and instructs him to take his mysteriously pregnant wife into his home. But honestly, it seems to me that the most miraculous part of this story is that Joseph could sleep at all. I mean, look, Mary is the perfect woman, conceived without sin and blameless in her manner of life. She is full of grace, as the angel announced, and she is set apart by God as his chosen vessel. Look, there is no other woman in Nazareth who can hold a candle to the Blessed Virgin Mary. And so imagine how torn Joseph must have been, knowing that she would be subject to stoning if it was known that the child was not his, but also really being desperately in love with this woman. And this is why I say it's a miracle that he's able to sleep with this intention of divorcing her quietly weighing on his heart. It must have torn him up inside. He must have been just distraught because this woman was so perfect. And yet the circumstances demanded that he would have to let her go. That fact, it seems to me, adds to the strangeness of this sign of a virgin to give birth to a child, foretold by the prophet Isaiah in that first reading. Look, there are an infinite amount of ways that the Lord could have signified that he would save his people. He had done it a number of times before in the Old Testament. We hear the bow in the clouds for Noah. We hear the sound of a tiny whispering sound for the prophet Elijah as he waits in the cave. We see this long line of descendants that is promised to Abraham as a sign of God entrusting him with a great nation. And so we might wonder, why does God have to make this so complicated? Why a virgin conceiving a child? Why does God have to overcomplicate things? Why does God have to put Mary and Joseph through all of this heartache? Why not an easier sign? I wondered this myself, why God has to make things so complicated. When I was discerning my own vocation to the priesthood, I was a senior in high school, and I fell madly in love with this girl. And within the same month, the seminary that I was going to attend announced that they were going to be closing. So here I am, falling in love with this girl. The seminary is closing. All the signs were pointing to God saying, seminary is not for you. You should get married and go on with your life. But I really I really wrestled with that decision. And it was made harder because of those circumstances that God had given to me. But it was through wrestling with those unforeseen factors that in many ways my vocation became more certain, that I was more clear about who God was calling me to be and the path that God was laying out for me. But it took me a while to get there. But I was grateful later for those circumstances that made me decide, do I really want this? Or am I just doing this because it seems like the right thing to do? This is the thing. God is trying to restore a relationship with humanity. And restoring relationships takes time, and it takes work, and it takes commitment. Especially a relationship between God and his creatures. In fact, this is why God comes to us through a virgin. Because it implies a human mother, but a divine father. Because Jesus himself is the binding force that brings together humanity and divinity. This is why it has to be so complicated, because there's this relationship that needs to be healed, that needs to be restored, because it's been wounded since the Garden of Eden. And Jesus himself is the one who comes to bring both together in himself and then to offer himself for the sake of our salvation. And in a beautiful way, everything else that the church does is an extension of that method of God, of bringing these things together, this link between a human presence and a divine presence. And so God chooses men to serve as priests so that he can work through us in order to bring salvation to the world. The fact that God uses all the sacraments, which every one of them involves a person that the Lord works through in order to bring healing and hope to God's people. All of it is a reminder of the very human method that God uses to reach us. Because what God is doing is developing and restoring a relationship with us. This can't be done from a distance. It has to be done from within. And so the heartache of Joseph is a necessary consequence of God using us human beings to do his work. And frankly, I think this is really encouraging for us. Because if you're struggling to hold your prayer life together, and you're thinking, I can barely focus for 3 minutes, just know that it's part of the work that has to be done to restore that relationship. If you find yourself in a relationship that feels really broken and off course, just know that the Lord wants to join you in that path. God wants to help you with that pain that you're wrestling with. And especially if you feel that God doesn't have a plan for your life. If you feel like you're just kind of drifting and you're not even sure if God is even present to you, especially for you, the Lord wants you to know that he is here and that he wants to stay with you and to show you the meaning and the purpose of your life. God doesn't just want to save us. He wants to join us. He wants to get in there with us. And that's all the more reason for us to celebrate next week at Christmas. To know that God comes from on high to lift us up, to save us from this kind of nothingness that we sometimes fall into, and to remind us that we are good and beautiful and worthy of being loved by God. And so I hope that you'll certainly join us for our Christmas liturgies, that you'll invite your friends and family, your enemies, everybody, whoever. Invite them all to come so that they'll know that the Lord has come to save them. I'll be down at Saints Mary and John for all the Christmas liturgies, so I won't be here with all of you. But please know of my sincere prayers for you as you celebrate Christmas. Know of my hope that the Lord comes to you in a very beautiful and profound way. And please pray for me.